What is up, everybody? I hope you're having a fantastic evening. I got this new guy on the show. I'll introduce you to him next. Appears to be a 49er fan. And we're going to talk about, can the 49ers turn it around in one offseason? And we'll do it next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports. We are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's been a while, but I got my guy, So Real, Sunil, in the building. What's up, Sunil?
Man, everything is everything, Jesse. I feel like ever since the 49ers season was over, it meant we were over, but that wasn't the case. I'm glad to be back on. Want to give you props, man. Obviously, you've been doing a lot of big things since our last show. Bleacher Report, right? It's a Bleacher Report.
Yeah, Bleacher Report,
Man.
yeah.
Huge. And I do want to thank you for the $34 I won on your underdog coming in second place. That was a lot of fun, and I'm excited about doing it next year when you do it again.
Yeah, you came in second, but that would have been crazy because I was doing we were doing like a jersey giveaway for the fantasy league. I ended up doing 2 leagues because a lot more people wanted to sign up, which was cool. I'll obviously check out fantasy or Underdog. They've been a fantastic sponsor all year long. Promo code LSS, links in the description. But yeah, man, you finished second. I was like, am I gonna have to buy a jersey for Sunil? Like, that's not. I mean, as much as I'm rooting for you, that'd be kind of weird. You know what I mean? I want to give it to like a random person. So.
People would have thought that it was definitely rigged.
Rigged or something, right? Yeah.
Like this. They don't understand. I'm just a man at fantasy, baby.
It would have been worse if I would have won. I'm glad I didn't win those leagues. My gosh, that would have been terrible. Absolutely terrible. But yeah, man, really happy to see you. Sweatshirt looks good. This is the first time I've seen it. Yeah,
man. Thank you for this. This is something that he bought me. So I appreciate Jesse for getting me this. It's definitely being worn, brother.
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah, I mean, because I sent it to you. I always like every year. Him and David, they're like my hosts that are just here, just donating time, and it's like the least I can do is get you some sick Niner gear at the end of the year around Christmas time. But we haven't streamed since like before Thanksgiving. So I haven't even seen this dang thing. So I'm glad that you're wearing it tonight, man. Really happy to see you. And obviously, can't wait to disagree. You're the one I disagree with most. And I've been seeing you with the Twitter fingers lately, and we got some things to talk about.
Yeah, right? Man. So, I gotta say, I'm gonna speak up for the fandoms. It seems like there's this conglomerate of content creators, Jesse. And my man, you've always been, kind of the voice of reason that guy, but you've been sucked up into it, my guy.
Oh, okay.
The fans against the content creators that are creating these narratives about the 49ers and all this kind of stuff. So we here spitting facts for the fans, baby.
Well, listen, there is a group of people that genuinely thinks that like we're like the Illuminati of content creation, and like we sit behind the scenes and like, all right, guys, the agenda today is we all talk about whatever, and then we're on it. You know what I mean? So way to just like fuel the fire on that one. You know, I appreciate.
You know what? I've been in those meetings, but I'm anti-establishment. I said no. I am not going to tweet about that. I'm tweeting the opposite.
He said I've been in those meetings. All right. Let's get into it, man. The 49ers have made some coaching hires. Number one, they got Robert Saleh. They got Brandt, who they brought over also from the New York Jets. What do these coaching hires say about the 49ers, man? Like, there's obviously a lot of different ways that we can go with this. And I think depending on where you're at, I'll tell you what my stance was going into the process, and then we can kind of get into it. And I'm curious to see what your stance was. My stance was I would prefer that the 49ers change up philosophy, do something different. And I felt like the only way to do that was to bring in a coach that they are not familiar with on defense. However, I did say, hey, I know Kyle. He's going to want to do what he wants to do. If that is the case, then the best hire, bar none, without question, is absolutely Robert Saleh based off of what fits Kyle Shanahan. And so overall, I'm very happy with the hire, just knowing that the philosophy was not going to change defensively. But what does it say about the 49ers to you, the hires that they made, not only on defensive coordinator with Saleh, but Brandt at special teams?
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think Shanahan did something with an unfamiliar coach in Steve Wilks, right? He brought him in, and obviously that didn't end the way that Shanahan wanted it to end. And maybe the X's and O's might be similar, but I do think you're getting kind of a philosophy change, right? When you hear the reports that uh basically Salah is running the defensive side, like he's the head coach of the defense, and he has kind of full autonomy when it comes to what he's doing with that defense. I think bringing in the special teams coach that Salah was working with at the Jets is the first sign of what I predict is going to be many things that are going to happen because Salah wants them to happen, which I think is different. I know, go back to the conglomerate that I'm talking about. One of the things that you guys constantly, create a narrative about is that Kyle Shanahan never changes. He never evolves. He's like the most stuck up, egotistical, doesn't want to give up any power. Nobody wants to work for him, right? All those type of things.
Oh, hold on. Okay. All right. I'll go ahead. I'll let you finish. I'll let
All
you
these are
finish.
jokes, by
I'll
the way.
rebuttal
But
that.
I think this hire kind of it kind of spits in the face of all those things, right?
Mhm.
Salah coming back to the 49ers when he could have taken a DC job somewhere else, right? He could have, potentially, I mean, he went for the head coaching jobs, none of them were offered to him, but there were other opportunities that he could have, right? He left the Green Bay Packers had given him a job. He potentially could have been a very highly sought after DC somewhere else. He came back to, the 49ers because I think he does understand or does work well with Kyle Shanahan and likes him as the head coach. But Kyle Shanahan is giving up some of that quote unquote power by what's it called? Empowering Salah to basically say, hey man, this is your unit. You do with it what you want. You have my full support. And what I think kind of gets misconstrued when it comes to Kyle Shanahan is I don't know if it's so much, the power and all this kind of stuff. I think he needs somebody he could trust. And if he trusts you, I think he's willing to give you kind of the power or whatever you want to deem it, autonomy, empowering, and all this kind of stuff. And I think that after D'Amico, I don't think he had that full trust in the defensive coordinators like he did in Salah, like he did with D'Amico Ryans. And I think he's going back to finding a guy that he truly trusts, that he believes, hey, I don't have to get involved as much because I trust that this guy is doing things this in a way that I trust. And that could mean that maybe some things are different, Jesse. Like we don't know. We don't know how D'Amico is going to come out when he has full autonomy over the defense. And are there going to be changes? Is it going to be more exotic? I mean, D'Amico's been gone for 2-3 years, learning under not Kyle
You mean
Shanahan.
Saleh. You mean Saleh. You mean Saleh. Sorry.
Who did I say?
Yeah.
D'Amico. Sorry.
D'Amico. Yeah. Yeah.
D'Amico's gone for 2-3 years too, but Salah has been gone for 3 years in a whole totally different system as far as organization, his own players, his own control, and all this kind of stuff. He might have taken some things, and he's going to bring this back and do something. I don't think is going to be like 180 degrees different than what he usually did, but there could be different wrinkles that are going on that could be the changes that we need to see. We ultimately know the 49ers need to be able to stop the run. The 49ers need to be able to stop mobile quarterbacks. And, those have been the two weaknesses of this team. It seems like for quite some time. And hopefully Salah with his new, I guess, power and autonomy can, change some of those X's and O's to be able to accomplish those goals.
Yeah, I think you could go both ways with it. I do tend to actually agree with you on this. That was like my favorite thing with the hire is that he Kyle Shanahan needs somebody that he fully trusts because here's what I saw from Kyle Shanahan the last couple of years, and for different reasons. Steve Wilkes lost the trust during that Minnesota Vikings game when he called that cover zero, all out blitz right before half. Then it was like they went into the bye week. They were on the 3-game losing streak. They asked him to come down from the booth. And it was weird from that point on. So Kyle, and we found out later, like during the 2-week preparation for the Super Bowl, he spent a lot of time coming up with the game plan on defense as well. Like Wilkes was going to call it, but Kyle, it was basically his game plan, and he was overriding things in his headset more than he would normally do. Then you fast forward to this year, and Sorensen fit what the players wanted and what Kyle maybe had hoped he wanted as well. But ultimately, this was his first time in the position, so he's learning on the fly. So you can imagine that Kyle also probably spending more time in those game plans during the week than what he wants to, which takes away from him game planning for the offense and all the other things that go on. So Robert Saleh definitely brings the stability and the trust to where Kyle Shanahan can be like, look, you go do that. I'm going to do this. Yes, we're going to talk throughout the week. You're ultimately running the game plan by me, and I'm giving you the thumbs up. But I trust you to come up with the excellent game plan week in and week out. And I trust that you're going to pivot when the game calls for it. You got this. So that is like a breath of fresh air for him. It's weight off of his shoulders and will allow him to be the best version of himself. That was a show that I made on Monday talking about all of that. However, if we're talking about, change and growth and whatever, he brought back the guy that he's here with that he was comfortable with. I don't know that says he's, willing to change or grow. I definitely see, hey, if he has full autonomy but I don't know that he didn't the final year he was here. You know what I mean? He might have been in that spot already. So he's just going right back to, hey, we're going to run it how we used to. Him bringing Saleh back shows that that's where he's comfortable. And it is the right move, but it also means that he's not necessarily willing to step outside of his comfort zone. And I also think that it says this. It's interesting because when he became a head coach, you have like a Rolodex of coaches that will work for you and that and you've built relationships with. Well, if you pay close attention, most of those coaches were handed from him or handed down to him from his dad's Rolodex. And once he burned through those coaches, he was out of options. He didn't have the relationships to shoulder tap X coach over here or Y coach over here. And he ran out of his bag of tricks. And so now, luckily for him, Saleh didn't get a head coaching job. I don't know what the backup plan would have been. I am afraid to even wonder, but luckily Saleh was available. Saleh and him do have obviously a good relationship, at least enough to where Saleh is going to come back. And I think it'll work out fantastically. But those are the things that I learned from the coaching hire.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know about the whole Rolodex thing. Like, there's not that's part of the what I'm talking about. Some of the narrative building. It's like, how do we know that there's not coaches out there that he could pick? Like, ultimately, so I think what I'm saying is I think Saleh was the best defensive coordinator available, right? Like, I think that most teams would want that had an open defensive coordinator position would want Robert Saleh as their defensive coordinator.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Why is it that because Kyle Shanahan had him as his defensive coordinator, to me, he got the best defensive coordinator out there. The narrative is, well, that's what he's comfortable with. That's what he's the safe bet or whatever the case may be. When if you look at it, take out, if any other team brought in Robert Saleh, their fan base would be saying, we got the best defensive coordinator. Our coach was able to attract the best. And so to me, that's what I see in this hire, that like you look at all the other defensive coordinators that were hired during this process, and some guys are excuse me, still picking their defensive coordinators right now. To me, I think that Robert Saleh is the best that was out there, and they got the best that was out there. Whether or not it's somebody that they've worked with before, that's, I think, a moot point, to the point that they got the best defensive coordinator that was available at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was other good coordinators out there. But yeah, I mean, I think especially for the 49ers, Saleh was absolutely the best. Like it was the best option.
Who was a defensive coordinator that got hired in this cycle that you could definitively say is better than Robert Saleh?
I didn't say that there was somebody definitively better. I said that
But then
Robert Saleh.
that's where I'm saying is like, so it's easy to be like, hey, well,
I think there were guys that are good coordinators that they easily could have pivoted and said, "Hey, we're going to do this." I guess my biggest issue with the whole thing was more the process, because Saleh was this close to getting a head coaching job. Like, what would they have done?
I
What would
mean,
they?
none of us
They
know
didn't
that,
have a
right?
fallback.
I think,
They
well,
didn't have a fallback though.
and that to me is where it's like, you might be right, Jesse. I'm saying, how do we know? Like, we think that just
Because
because
they didn't interview anybody.
well,
They interviewed one person that even the Detroit Lions were like, "Hey, not only did we lose our defensive coordinator, but we lost the backup plan defensive coordinator, and then we ended up still not hiring that guy that they interviewed." So their plan was like
well,
trash from the beginning.
the way that I look at this is all of us are speculating at this point. To
Mhm.
me, the guys that they would probably want to interview probably aren't going to come into an interview when the reports are out that we want Robert Saleh, right? So until Robert Saleh gets a head coaching job and is not available as a defensive coordinator, why would the upper tier defensive coordinators that potentially are on Kyle Shanahan's list that we don't know about, why would they come in for an interview when they know, hey, the reports were out after the first interview with Robert Saleh, it's Robert Saleh or bust. They're waiting for Robert Saleh, all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I can't confidently say that there was no backup plan. I just think that, look, they're not bringing guys in to waste their time if they already know that, hey, this is the guy that we're going to go with because we feel like this is the best guy out. So that's just how I see it.
King says, "How long is Saleh's contract?" That I don't know. I'm sure it was reported. It really doesn't matter. I mean, I think that he'll be here as long as he doesn't get a head coaching position. I don't think he's just going to dip and go somewhere else. So, basically, it's like, does he get a head coaching position next year or the year after or ever? And until then, he's here. He's the guy. So, I think the actual length of the contract is irrelevant. It just comes down to, can he get a head coaching position and when does that happen? Frank Tom Ocean says, "Happy to see your progress, Jesse. Hashtag GOAT." No, I appreciate you, Frank Tom Ocean. Always been a great supporter of the channel. Thank you so much. And then Dave says, "All right, in my super white guy voice, fire Lyle." Nice. Well played. Well played. All right. Let's talk about this. One's been really interesting to me. A lot of people have drawn tons of conclusions about Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy in particular, based off of how these playoffs have played out. What, if any, conclusions or thoughts have you pulled from watching these playoffs that you can then tie back to Kyle and or Brock?
I mean, I think when I look at what I'm seeing from these playoffs, uh, I think the best side of the ball for all of these playoff teams have been the defense and their ability to make big plays, turn the ball over, which ultimately in both championship games, I think was the defining piece, is just the defense's ability to stop. Like, obviously Eagles defense did a number on the Commanders, and then the Chiefs defense just being able to make the big stops when they needed to, right? And getting the turnovers and all of those types of things. To me, what that means for Colin Brock. I mean, obviously, when we've seen the success from Kyle Shanahan, and when we've seen the teams that the team that Brock Purdy was able to take to the Super Bowl, they had that same opportunistic defense that was making plays. And then ultimately, you look at on the opposite side, the quarterback roles, they were able to, make the plays that needed to be made to, ultimately get the victory, right? And so, yeah, I think that, when it comes to Kyle, obviously, I think that the buck stops with him. So the defense not being where it needs to be, you got to put that on Kyle because he's the head coach. When it comes to Brock, hard to say. I mean, ultimately, he's the quarterback that we're going to have. So I don't know how I think that, there's this, is he the right guy? Is he like, I don't know. I think we need to stop debating that because ultimately he is going to be the guy, whether he's the right guy or not. So it's just, okay, well, what do you need to do? What does the team need to look like to get the best out of a Brock Purdy led team? And I think you need to have a very stout top 3 defense that's able to get turnovers and, have the weapons around him to be able to make the plays on offense. Because ultimately that's what it seemed like the victory was. I don't think that either of the matchups were like, there was so much more talent on one side of the ball than the other side of the ball, Jesse. I think it was just ultimately defense and execution and things. And I guess the criticism that I could put on Kyle is like, look, Andy Reid out coaches everybody. Like what him and Spagnuolo did, they're just levels above and like I got crushed for saying that, like, yeah, man, like Kyle Shanahan, I don't know if he could beat Andy. Like, I don't know if anybody could really beat Andy Reid and Spagnuolo when they're in their bag. Like, they don't make the coaching mistakes that every other coach makes. Like, there's a reason why when those two have been, like, not too many people have beat them. Like, you have to have a Tom Brady on your team to be able to beat them in the Super Bowl, right? And yeah, that's a deficiency that Kyle needs to. I don't think that you can confidently say the way you can say with the Andy Reid coach team that every single year that Kyle Shanahan is out coaching the other team. But I do think that, like, he's much better than, 90% of the coaches out there, 95% of the coaches out there, but not better than Andy Reid. And I think that Sirianni deserves a lot of credit too for turning around their team as quick as he did, making the right coaching hires and, getting them back to the Super Bowl. Now, whether they're going to win or not, we'll see in a week. But I think that, coaching does matter, and Kyle Shanahan needs to get back into his bag because he's shown that he could be the coach that gets a team there. He just didn't do it this last year.
Yeah, I think that one thing that you kind of brought up was like there's a lot of just critical errors when it comes to possessing the ball and when to call your timeouts and making bad decisions on turnovers. And there's just a lot of mistakes being made. And Kyle gets killed for him, and deservedly so, because it seems like he gets up 10 and all of a sudden, all right, here we go. Rams twice in the Super Bowl, once as an offensive coordinator, whether you think he deserves blame for that or not. But all of these coaches are making dumb mistakes week after week, except for Andy Reid.
Right.
Like, he just, and also, like, watching the Chiefs a lot, obviously, they clearly have a gear that nobody is ready for year in and year out. Whether it was Kelsey last year, where it's like, yeah, he had a good year, but once it was time to turn up, he was there. Or Patrick Mahomes running, or Andy Reid's going to call this play that nobody's seen all year long, and he hasn't ran in 2 years. There's always an extra gear that team can tap into. They're just special. They're absolutely special. They're beating team after team every year. And we'll see if they can beat the Eagles. We're going to talk about, like, who we're choosing in that game, like who we want to win and why. So I'll kind of hold that for that time span. But it does tie back to this and why I'm choosing the team that I'm choosing. But the Chiefs are just phenomenal, man. They execute at a high level. They just know how to win. They know how to win at a level that nobody else knows how to. And there's critical mistakes game in and game out by either, players or coaches. But the Chiefs seem to either avoid them or overcome them every single time. It's absolutely incredible to watch. It really is.
Yeah, and I mean, look, when you look at the Eagles ascension back, right? They were a team that after the 49ers beat them last season, they pretty much fell apart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for them to come back and look as good as they do, you got to give a lot of credit. I think, Sirianni gets credit, but Howie Roseman, man, making the move for Saquon, bringing in some of the defensive pieces that they brought in, retooling. You mentioned retooling that defensive line, getting younger, and he's one of those guys that like gets rid of a guy a year early versus a year late, which I know is something that you constantly kind of talk about. But what it says about Kyle and Brock, I think you got to throw John Lynch in there too, because look, these teams right now that are in the Super Bowl, they on every level, I think, outdid the 49ers this season, right? So they deserve to be there over the 49ers. 49ers didn't have the offseason that a team that's going to go to the Super Bowl should have.
Yeah.
49ers, the coaching decisions weren't the coaching decisions that you make of a team that goes to the Super Bowl, right? They weren't decisive decisions that, and it like elevated your team. Whereas you look at what Sirianni did, those were the coaching decisions. You elevated your team on both sides of the ball. Obviously the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and they made the moves that they needed to make to get better at the margins that they needed to continue to stay intact. I just think that, luckily I do believe that this offseason is starting a lot better for the 49ers. They are making decisive moves that I do think are elevating the team. But when you look back in retrospect, yeah, I mean, the offseason kind of put those two teams ahead of the game and, into the position that they're in right now at the end of the season.
Yeah, for sure. You bring up that these teams deserve to be there, and it started with the offseason and how they went through things. We're not to the free agency period yet, so we don't know how that's going to go. We're certainly not to the draft yet, and we don't know how that's going to go. But the 49ers so far have already started off way better than they did last year, because last year at this time, well, first of all, they were going to the Super Bowl, which was pretty awesome. But once that game ended, it was like Wilkes was out, and who's going to be the defensive coordinator? Well, we now know that later on they hired Sorensen. This year, they've already taken care of the one thing they can thus far, which is hire a good coaching staff. They've knocked that out of the park. So can they do that again when it comes to free agency and the draft? And so the question becomes, is one off season enough, knowing everything that's going on with the 49ers, roster wise, coaching wise, just everything that went as bad as it could have this year? Do you feel like one off season is enough to not just be good again and be competitive, but to be that team potentially in the NFC again? Do you feel like one off season is enough to get them there, or do they need more at this point?
One off season is enough, but I don't think they should do it.
Okay.
And what I
What's
mean
the
by
answer?
that is, look, there's a lot of money that they have from freeing up contracts. They're rolling over, I think, like 50 million, and they're going to be, obviously signing Brock Purdy and all of
Mhm.
these moves that are going to give them more money. So they could easily go out there and use free agency to plug holes with expensive guys that might be able to produce this year and next year. But once again, kicking the can down the line where they're ultimately going to have that pay that price, right? So yeah, can they do it in one off season? Yes, I don't think that their roster makeup is that far away, as far as you plugging in pieces that are, if you want to just spend the money. Now, I don't think that's the long term solution to continue to build the way that I think the Eagles have built. Right, they're they're constantly retooling through the draft rather than just focusing on free agency. So I think that with their free agency and through the draft, because this last draft that they had, you got to say it was a success with the amount of impact players that they were able to draft from that. They have another draft like that with a free agent. Obviously, I think that they're back to being one of the more competitive teams in the NFC. But I do think that they need to continue to build that way rather than just finding band-aids, because for them to use that one offseason to get to the dominant team again is going to be a lot of band-aids. And ultimately, I think that if it doesn't work out, it ends up being like what happened 2 years ago, right? They went all in on that one season. They got to a Super Bowl, it didn't work out, and then all of a sudden, your roster's older, your team's falling apart, all these injuries, and you can't even make the playoffs, right? So I do think that they can if they wanted to. I don't know if it's the right move though, as far as the proper way to get back to being that team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there with you. I mean, been talking for a while about moving on from some of these aging players and the contracts and what have you, but I do think one off season is enough. I do. But it has to be done perfectly, because there is a lot that this team does need to rectify. I mean, they've really got to revamp that defensive line. They've got to retool the offensive line. They've got to hope that big time paid players like Ayuk and Debo and Trent and CMC, at least 3 of those guys can turn back the clock and be close to what they were 2 years ago. That's a big ask. And, whether that's, if they sign Dre Greenlaw and bring him back, okay, cool. But can he stay healthy? There's just a lot of moving parts for sure. So can it happen? Yes. Am I banking on it happening? No. Which does bring me to a question that I didn't give you preparation for, but it's just in my head because of a show that I did, 2 nights ago. And I asked the same question to the audience, which is, are the expectations, like, have they changed? Because going into this year as a fan, it was clear Super Bowl or bust. This is the final year. That's the way that we all saw it. Well, now that they've gone 6-11, in a weird way, I feel like that buys the team a little bit of reprieve, because you're looking at it going, okay, the Lions are really good. The Eagles are really good. Now all of a sudden we got this team, the Commanders, that is coming out of nowhere. The Rams are good in the division. There's a lot of good teams all of a sudden in the NFC that I don't think a lot of people were prepared for. But now that they've seen that there's a lot of good teams, yes, it is open. But at the same time, we're looking at the 49ers going, wow, that was about as bad of a season as you could have. Maybe we should temper expectations on Super Bowl or bust next year and can we just get back to the playoffs? Yeah. Like, do you kind of feel like that relief has come, or do you think people are like, nope, Super Bowl or bust, there are no excuses. That's what it is.
I don't know. I definitely not the fan base. Nobody's tempering their expectations. Come on, this fan base, right? But and for me, look, the team, I think the expectations are always, if you're a 49er fan, if you're not getting closer to the Super Bowl, you're getting farther away from it, and that's where decisions need to be made. I mean, a lot of, obviously, I'm a Kyle Shanahan super fan. There's people here in the chat being mad disrespectful about my love for Kyle Shanahan. However, I've been very clear that, treat Kyle Shanahan the same way that the Eagles treated Andy Reid. You get 2 back-to-back losing seasons that don't don't make it to the playoffs, and he should be fired. Like, yeah, if you're not competing for Super Bowls, no matter how much I believe in him, look, the results are the results. So to me, I do think they need to be competitive enough to, win a Super Bowl immediately, because ultimately this isn't Kyle Shanahan's 3rd year with the team. This is going to be his 9th, 10th year.
9th
so it's
year,
like,
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, look, you, somebody else potentially, but all of this is created based off of your decisions, Kyle. So if you can't get there in year 9, you don't get to start the clock over again based off of your bad results, right? You have to then be like, okay, we need to get somebody in here that, can take the baton and take it to the next level. So, maybe realistically, it's not Super Bowl or bust, but I think if I'm Jed York, it is for Kyle Shanahan, because ultimately I've given you 8 years of pretty much carte blanche to do everything that is done. The team can't start getting worse or farther away from a Super Bowl under you. Ultimately you have to show that you can get back there and win. Otherwise, I need to go a different route. So maybe in reality it's not Super Bowl or bust, but I still think you need to hold Kyle Shanahan to those standards.
Yeah, and in a weird way, I feel like, and obviously it's not done intentionally. I mean, Kyle's just trying to win, which is the right decision, by the way. But in a weird way, because Kyle has brought in Robert Saleh and because they're going to pay Brock, he's kind of put his back against the wall, because you think about it. Everybody knows Robert Saleh is a really good defensive coordinator. You just said it yourself. He was the best option out there. And I think most people feel that way. You can't gaslight the fan base into thinking that it's his fault if the defense doesn't play well again. Right? Like, you don't get to fire Robert Saleh. And if you pay Brock, you can't do what you did with Jimmy, where it's like, guys, I mean, I don't know, I'm doing my best over here, but Jimmy, he kind of sucked. You can't do that with Brock. You've hitched your wagon to Brock and you've hitched your wagon to Robert. So in that sense, yes, Kyle Shanahan, whether intentional or not, has put his back against the wall. And the 49ers have to produce this year, in my opinion. Otherwise, people will start losing confidence in Kyle. Even the biggest Kyle supporters will have to say, all right, listen, what excuse is there really? You know what I mean? We got Robert Saleh back. He hitched his wagon to this quarterback. Finally, we've been hoping that would happen, and he finally did it, and we still didn't produce. So where do we go from here? So I do tend to agree with that a little bit.
Yeah, and not it would be malpractice if you continue to give like 10 years of, coaches don't get that much time, right? And now, Kyle Shanahan has gotten that much time. Look, you've made the statement that Brock Purdy will be here as long as I'm here as the head coach, right? Like you just mentioned, laid it out. We just made Robert Saleh the highest paid defensive coordinator or whatever they made him, type of thing. Like, Jed York has given him carte blanche, man. Every decision that he wanted to make, Jed hasn't said no, right? And whether they've been good decisions or bad decisions, but ultimately, like, you have to live and die by those. So yeah, I think that it is Super Bowl or bust, whether it's a realistic expectation or not.
Yeah, absolutely. SoCal Ram, member for 3 months. Appreciate you, brother. And then he comes in with a super chat and says, Jesse, Kyle needs to change his philosophy. Starts within him to change the boat around. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I do ultimately think, and even Sunil agrees with that. He said it a million times. Like, we view Kyle differently, but we both do also agree that this year Kyle shouldn't have been fired for different reasons, but we agree there. And we do agree that another season like this, you can't continue to move on with Kyle. You just can't. So
Yeah, totally agree.
so
I
we'll
mean,
see.
and when people say like he needs to revamp his philosophy, I mean, that's not what people do, man. Like, head coaches, like, how many head coaches revamp their philosophy? Like, it doesn't happen that often. There's a couple, like, you could probably say, Harbaugh, when Lamar Jackson came in, like, he, revamped the offense a little bit around him. Obviously, Andy Reid, with Patrick Mahomes, but for the most part, like, there's not, like, coaches are who they are, right? You're hiring them because their philosophy and you believe in their philosophy. So I don't know if that's a realistic expectation of what Kyle Shanahan does. I think ultimately, it's kind of like, hey, this is what I believe wins, and if it shows that it doesn't win, like, then you just got to let him go. And I think next year is really important for Kyle Shanahan. Like, if he can't show that he could win doing the things the way that he believes that it takes to win, then I'm 100% behind, him, getting fired and, going with another philosophy. But if you're expecting Kyle Shanahan to revamp his whole philosophies that have gotten him to 2 Super Bowls and multiple NFC championship games. Like, that's not gonna happen. Like,
Yeah, I don't expect wholesale changes, and I don't know that SoCal Ram is. I don't. I mean, he could be saying this, but I do think that there are some things that need to be tweaked, and this is why going back to the Salah hire, this was another piece of it where Robert does allow him to now not only take a deep breath during game planning and weeks and coaching on game day, but from this point on until they get into the new season, because it is clear that teams have figured out that there are tendencies that the 49ers have not adjusted, that when they do give him a certain look that he is not wanting to see, he will not run play action. He said it, he literally said that in a press conference at the end of, or not at the end of the year, during the year. Why aren't you running more press conference or more play action? Well, teams are just giving us certain looks and we can't run it. Okay. Well, teams have figured out that first of all, that's your best weapon, and we know that. And we can take it away from you by showing you this. And they've also figured out that in third and long situations, if they show him certain looks, that his quarterback is directed to hit the hot receiver, which is always short of the sticks, and we can get him off the field. So there are tweaks that he has to make to his game planning and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, who he is, like at his core, that's not going to change. Not as a 40-something-year-old man. It's just none of us are going to change at
yeah.
our core who we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I totally agree that the offense was super vanilla. Like, it, if any aspect of the team was great this year, at least you could hang your hat on. Okay, well, they were good in this aspect, but you can't really say that about any aspect of this team this year, and that falls on Kyle. Like, you can't go from being elite to being like bottom of the barrel, which is what happened. So ultimately, like, look, your past successes had bought you this year, but you have to get back to who we think you are. Because if you're not that guy, then we need to go find somebody else, right? And so I think that's ultimately what Kyle needs to do at this point is like, look, man, we gave you your quarterback, we gave you your defensive coordinator, we gave you your roster. Like, what are you going to do with it? We can't just be this team that is like every other team, right? You got to go back to that upper echelon that you had created, which is the reason why we're giving you, more time, even though you had a horrible season last year.
I'm going to make a statement. You tell me if you agree with it or not. If Kyle Shanahan was the defensive, he came in to the 49ers as a defensive coach. Based off of this last year, how this season went, would Kyle Shanahan, the defensive play caller, have fired the offensive coordinator of this team?
Yeah.
Right? But he can't fire himself. I mean, you know what I mean? So to your point, I agree with that wholeheartedly, which means, bud, you would have fired yourself if you
Yeah.
were the head coach and you were a defensive guy. So you really got to turn it around. You do.
Well, I guess yes, but it depends. Like, yes, I agree. Like, if it's just this year in a box, right?
For
Then
sure. Yeah.
yes, right. But if he was, had the success that Kyle Shanahan has had up, and this was just a abysmal year type of thing, then probably it'd buy him another year. But absolutely, just this year in a box, terrible, terrible. Like, even with the injuries to CMC and to Brandon Ayuk, like it's not like this roster was not like void of talent. Jennings is still really good. Obviously, I think, all of our debates about George Kittle, I think I'm winning those like crazy with you right now. If it was Jesse, George Kittle would be somewhere else right now instead of like the best player on our offense. I think Jordan Mason was really, really good. I think Isaac Guerrero, really, really good, right? So, like, there was still a lot of talent on this offense, and you didn't make the most of it because of whatever reason it was. Maybe you were too focused, you didn't on the defense, and you weren't managing your time the same way you're able to with whatever. So I believe in Kyle Shanahan. I think he's a good head coach. I think he understood what his flaws were this season, and that's why he went so hard after Saleh because he understands. Look, I can't put that much effort into a defense and still be able to be my best on the offensive side and overall head coaching things. And Jesse, I think the next step too, which we won't know till the draft or whatever, he needs to give up some of that personnel stuff as well and really let John Lynch do what John Lynch needs to do. Because ultimately, I think that you mentioned it. I think the league has caught up to the 49ers. And it's up to Kyle to revamp as far as just like be a better Kyle Shanahan, right? Because I do believe that he's better than a lot of these other teams, but he has to unlock that by focusing on what he's great at. And I don't think he's the best personnel guy. We obviously know he's not the best defensive coach guy, but you can be the best offensive guy, but you have to be able to delegate. Let John Lynch do personnel. Let Saleh do defense, and you focus on overall big picture of head coaching and the offensive side of the ball. And I hope that's what he understood about this season. And hopefully those are some of the changes that we'll see moving forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that would be great if we could see those things. You did talk a little bit about the draft. You talked about free agency. Obviously, we're a ways away from that. Is there anybody that you've just looked at, whether it's draft or free agency, that you just, oh man, the 49er, we got to have him in a 49er uniform? Is that guy exist for you, or is it still a little too early?
I mean, it's too early as far as just like who's out there. But I mean, I'm personally, if I'm gonna pick somebody right now, man, it's Dre Greenlaw. I want that boy
Dre,
back.
just bring back Dre. Yeah,
Bring back Dre. Like, the whatever they're saying on the internet or PFF grades it or whatever, 1 year, 6 million, 5 million guaranteed or whatever the case may be. Man, I'd say do it. Like, this defense looks so much different with Dre Greenlaw than without Dre Greenlaw. I get it. I understand he can't stay healthy. Like, he's injury prone. All that kind of. But man, like, what impact player? I don't know if there's another better impact player than Dre Greenlaw out there in free agency that we know makes this defense. I mean, that would be the guy that I'd want back.
It's interesting. We'll see how this goes. Spotrac or Spot Rack, however you say it, over the cap. They always have projections. If the number was truly that 1 year, 6 million, that's no brainer. I don't care what's going on. That's a no brainer. That's such little money that you're not tied up in a lot of years. Yes, that's for sure. I will be shocked, absolutely shocked, if he hits the open market, and it sounds like he's going to, that is the best that he comes away with. I think he's going to come away with a multi-year deal, probably closer to around 10 to 12 a year. And the 49ers are going to have to make a real decision, and only they know how healthy he truly is. I don't think, the injury thing is interesting because I don't believe that he's injury prone per se. We're talking about one major injury that he came back from in less than a year. And when you look at Achilles tears, that is up to a 2-year injury. And when he came back, the night he was back, Marco pointed it out. I agreed. I asked Grant, who was on the field, and I said, is this like a TV trick, or is it clear that the side he tore his Achilles on, his calf, is about half the size of his other calf? And he texted me back. He's like, yeah, absolutely. That is not a TV trick. That is actually what it is. And that's normal, by the way. So yes, he's healthy from a standpoint of, okay, I can play. I'm not going to re-tear the Achilles. But there is a buildup that your body needs that he just didn't have time to go through. This offseason, he's going to have plenty of time. I would be shocked if this is something that lingers. Certainly, injury can happen to anybody, but it's not like if Dre Greenlaw was missing games, multiple games a year for a bunch of different stuff. It's like, you torn meniscus, and then the Achilles thing, and concussion here, and separated shoulder there. But that's not the case. We're talking about a major injury that he came back from, and the calf stuff is clearly tied to that same injury. He just, you know what I mean? So I'm actually not that concerned about re-injury or anything like that. But there is a dollar amount that I think the 49ers can reach in a year amount. And again, like I said, if it's 1 year, $6 million, prove it. If they don't do that, I would be highly upset and highly shocked. I do think that there's going to be a team that's going to give him that multi-year deal, though. There's too many Shanahan, Saleh, D'Amico, Lynch disciples out in the league for him to not find somewhere to go that's going to be like, hey, we need a linebacker. You're still under 30. We see the impact you make to that team.
Yeah.
We'll get our medical hands on you. We're comfortable with the situation. Here's a fat contract. I would be shocked.
Can you imagine him with the Commanders?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I could.
You don't
yes.
think you don't think Peters over
Adam
there
Peters with his $96 million to spend wouldn't be like, yeah, dude, we'll give you a 3-year, $36 million deal, no problem.
Yeah. But I think that's the guy that, and maybe it's heartstrings because he's just such a fan favorite. But I personally like more than, I mean, obviously CMC has that same effect on the offensive side, but the defensive side, I mean, we never see Fred Warner not there. I'm sure if Fred Warner's not there, we'd see the same type of thing. But
yeah,
Dre Greenlaw has that impact, man. So I don't know. I think that especially with Saleh there, with him, Warner, and Dre Greenlaw there, I think the defense could get back to where it needs to be very quickly with those guys.
absolutely. Dave says, Jess, Sunil, do you guys eat cereal? What's your favorite? Do you eat cereal?
I don't, man. I'm not a huge breakfast guy. I'm usually just like some protein shakes and stuff like that in the morning after my workout. But what my favorite cereals when I was eating cereals whereas Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Reese's Peanut Butter Puffs.
Oh, the peanut butter puffs. Those are good.
Yeah.
I haven't had a bowl of cereal in, I mean, maybe a bowl in like the last 5 years. I'm not a big cereal eater, but I did used to when I was younger. When I was in my 20s, I would eat cereal for like dinner. I didn't care. And there's tons of good ones, dude. There's Life, Cinnamon Life, Captain Crunch, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. My favorite growing up though was always Count Chocula because it was rare. That when I was growing up, it was in just the Cleveland area or the Ohio area, and so we would have it shipped because my stepmom was from that area, so she would have it shipped every year to us from her family members. And then as I got older, it started to become a thing across the country, and you could just readily buy it. So it kind of lost its luster. But growing up, Count Chocula, and you could only get it during Halloween time, was like the best to me. So
Great question, Dave.
it is a very good. Yeah, finally, Dave. Gosh, geez. All right, let's get into this one here. A little would you rather.
Ooh,
would you rather. And I got a Greenlaw question for you because you went tough for Dre Greenlaw, man. And I agree with you, by the way. But in this would you rather game, the question is, would you rather sign Dre Greenlaw and keep Jake Moody or cut Jake Moody, but also not sign Dre Greenlaw?
So that part I didn't understand when I originally answered this over because
you don't get both.
I thought it was like, would you rather sign Dre Greenlaw or cut Jake Moody? I'm like, how is this even a question, bro? Like,
yeah. No. If you cut Moody, you don't get Greenlaw. But if you keep Greenlaw, basically you either keep them both or get rid of them both. What would you do?
Because I think I have a loophole.
What's the loophole?
So I would definitely want Dre Greenlaw on. So that means you keep Jake Moody, but you cut him in the middle of the season because
no. He's a ride or die, man. He's your go-to all year long.
Oof. I mean, that's super tough. And I think I love Dre Greenlaw more than I hate Jake Moody. So I ultimately think that the defense is going to be way more important for this team, and I think that Dre Greenlaw makes this defense a top 3 defense when he's on there. And potentially we don't need Jake Moody to save our butt when we have Dre Greenlaw and this defense creating havoc. So I'm gonna go with I'd rather have Dre Greenlaw than lose them both.
It's a question of would you rather. All right. Have you ever played Would You Rather? Open up your imagination. All right. Just open it
What
up.
about you?
Goodness sakes. I have to get rid of Moody because I can't trust him, and games too often come down to the kicker. As much as I love Dre Greenlaw, he could be great, but games are going to be tight in the NFL. And if a playoff game comes down to Moody's right leg, I would throw up.
Yeah.
I would be
I don't
sick.
think I don't think Moody's in the league next season, bro. So I think this question is moot. I think he's not
Yeah,
in the
it may
league
be.
anymore.
It may be. It may be. Okay. Would you rather fix the D line this offseason? Like pour pretty much all of your assets into the D line, or pour your assets into the O line?
Yeah, so I think this playoffs changed my answer because I think I would have answered this differently if I didn't before this playoffs.
Mm.
But after watching these playoffs, all of my asset or where I would want to fix first, because I think you need to fix both, right? So let's just get this out there. Um, I think you should fix both. The trenches are definitely where both need to get upgraded, but I'm prioritizing D line over O line.
I agree with you. I actually agree with you. I do. All
Oh, you're
right.
finally
Okay.
right.
I don't for the first time all night. I'm right. That's good. Okay. Debo Samuel's contract is in a weird flux situation. And they have to free up money one way or another with his contract, in my opinion. And I think they will one way or another. I would be surprised if he just plays it out as is. And maybe he will. But in this scenario, that is not an option. You either to free up that money long term, you either are cutting Debo or you're extending Debo, which gives you that money now, but obviously you're giving him extra years on the end of that contract. What are you doing? Would you rather cut him now or extend him to free up some money?
So ideally, I'd like to trade him. But out of
That's
those
not an
2
option.
options, out of those 2 options, I'm cutting him because
Yeah.
I think that the best years of Debo are behind him. And I do think that Debo is a crutch for Kyle Shanahan. And what I mean by that is for some reason like Kyle Shanahan has this belief in Debo, and I think if Debo's not there, it gives Kyle Shanahan or forces Kyle Shanahan to spread the ball around, which I think is ultimately the best offense for this team. So I think that it's kind of like addition by subtraction, getting Debo off of the team. But I do think that there'll be a suitor that would potentially trade for him. You know, might not be like a third or a second round, maybe like a fourth or a fifth. And I think you should take that, especially if it's a fifth, because the 49ers do wonders with fifth round
Rush.
picks.
Fifth round picks. Yeah, they do. They do. Okay. You can
What about
only I'm cutting Debo. I'm
yeah,
good.
extending goes against all of your philosophies on TV.
All the philosophy. If all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, I would really extend you and be like, dude, have you been listening to yourself for the last, I don't know, 2 years on this show that we've done together? Like, what are you talking about? This, you just make things up now? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on? Yeah, that would go against all my philosophy. You're right. Okay. Would you rather draft a tight end at some point in this draft, which I think second tight end is always a position of need with this team.
Yeah.
But they don't hit. That's the problem. They just can't hit. Or draft another running back in this draft, obviously knowing that they often don't hit that either. But they're going to draft one and only one. Would you rather it be a tight end or a running back?
I'm gonna go with tight end,
Okay.
and the reason for that is because I do think that it's easier to find a good running back that's undrafted than a good tight
Mhm.
end that's undrafted. And I
Okay.
do
That's
think
good.
that we know that, hey, I still think that, like, look, I know if Jesse was the GM, Kittle wouldn't be on this team anymore. But thankfully, Jesse's not the GM because Kittle is really, really good, and I think he should get an extension for how good that he is. But I do think that having a second guy can open up a lot for Kyle Shanahan with two tight end sets, and and maybe be able to extend even George Kittle's career with having somebody that could maybe take some pressure off of that position for him. So I do think that there's a lot of good tight ends in this draft that could fall, third, fourth round, that the 49ers could have and develop. So yeah, I would rather pick a tight end just because running back, I mean, like a Jordan Mason, right? Undrafted. I think they do that quite a bit. Then I haven't heard of an undrafted tight end that the 49ers have had success with.
Yeah, and I also just looking at the free agent list out there. I mean, you can find running backs all day long.
Mm-hmm.
I went through position by position and came up with a bargain player at every position that the 49ers should look at. I couldn't even do that at tight end. Like, there's nobody I can recommend at all for this team.
Will
There's
you admit you
no
were wrong
tight end.
about Kittle?
When did I say what did I really say that? I
Yeah,
don't
he was
remember
on
that
your
take,
list
but
of
I may
guys
have.
that 49ers should get off of.
When did
Never
I say that? Are you talking about this season?
I feel like since we've been on this, you're like, don't mess with Kittle's contract, don't extend him. You were saying that he's one of those guys that he's gonna fall off. So you shouldn't put more money into George Kittle. And I'm like, dude, remember the arguments. I was like, even if you get 80% of Kittle, he's still a top 5 tight end in the league and going to be much better. So you should extend him. And you were like, nope, he's old, he's going to fall off. That's steep and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
I'm really
I
taking
honestly
victory laps
don't.
on this one.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously passionate about it, so I'll
I
just
am.
agree and say that I said it. And if I did, then yeah, I was definitely wrong for sure. I mean, Kittle's an absolute dog. I mean, yeah, they can't find a tight end to save their life. So I really don't remember the take, but if I said it, then yeah, that was clearly the wrong take. Yeah, for sure.
One of many. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, you sit up here all day long with takes, you're going to be wrong a lot.
For sure.
So, yes,
For
there
sure.
are probably hundreds of takes that I would love to take back at this point, but
Yeah.
such is life. It is what it is. Well, I will say this though, Debo also wouldn't be on this team, and they wouldn't have re-signed CMC either. So,
Yeah.
pat myself on the back for those. No, I'm just joking. All right.
CMC to be determined, but Debo for sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, and CMC would have. I mean, even if he was on this team, though, I just wouldn't have given him that money. I thought that was silly, absolutely
Yeah.
silly. I don't understand that. But all right, there are two ex 49ers that a lot of people for multiple years have been talking about. I know last year at the trade deadline, the 2023 season, a lot of people were like hot to trot. Hey, go trade for one of these guys. And now they're both free agents. And I've seen a lot of 49er fans like, man, you got to bring these guys back, but you can only bring back one. Would you bring back DJ Reed or DJ Jones?
That's tough because they both have hard first names. DJ is a tough first name to have.
I'll go with DJ.
DJ. DJ Reed or DJ. What was the other one? DJ Jones. I gotta go DJ Jones, man. DJ Jones was help this run stop the run, man, and that's what our biggest needs are. I do like DJ Reed a lot, but I do think we need more help in that interior defensive line than we do at cornerback. And DJ Jones is that. So I'm going with DJ Jones.
Yeah, I would have to go with DJ Jones as well. That defensive tackle position is just such a glaring weakness right now. A lot of people have mentioned DJ Jones, and I've said no, just because I think he's going to be in that $10 to $12 million range as well. And I feel like that's a lot, but the 49ers need to pour assets there. And so if they're going to spend a decent chunk of money either way in this scenario, heck yeah, DJ Jones would be the right answer for sure.
Especially if you could, if they use their first round pick on one of those top tackles as well. I mean, that could be really good because, having that, because once again, you mentioned it, the 49ers defensive line is always best when they have a lot of that rotation. They always have people healthy. So yeah, I mean, they just need the bodies of of like top tier talent to be able to throw out these opposing offenses, right? And I think stopping the run is going to be a premium, right? That's what they really need to do. I mean, Saquon isn't going anywhere. Gibbs isn't going anywhere. So like they need to be able to stop the run. And DJ Jones definitely helps that.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched some all 22 last night of Walter Jones against Georgia and LSU. Or excuse me, Walter Nolan. I said Walter Jones. Walter Nolan. And James Pierce, who's a defensive end. He's an edge.
Mm-hmm.
Walter Nolan is, oh my gosh. And he was projected to go in the 20s like a week ago, but the Senior Bowl, his name's like flown up the priority list all of a sudden. He might end up being a top 10 guy. We'll see. But I think there's a real likelihood that he's there at 11. And if he's there and the 49ers went there, I would be ecstatic. I mean, he is a beast, an absolute beast. And picking a defensive tackle at 11, I would have zero issue with.
Right.
Zero. So, okay, last one. Would you rather have the Chiefs win or the Eagles win the Super Bowl?
Tough, man. I'm really looking forward to Kendrick Lamar's halftime show. Let me tell you.
Yeah. I'll go first. I'll go first on this one and give you some time to think. Okay. So a couple questions ago, we were talking about the playoffs and kind of what we learned. For me, I'm rooting for the Eagles to. Rooting is a harsh word, all right, but I would prefer the Eagles to win. Okay. And the reason I say that is if the Eagles don't win, what is the hope that we have any shot at winning the Super Bowl ever? I mean, as long as, and not just us, every other team in the league, by the way, will look at it and be like, okay, well, as long as Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes and Reed and Spagnuolo are there, we're toast. Mm-hmm. Nobody can beat these guys. They've ran up 2 years in a row in a Super Bowl against teams with lesser quarterbacks, but capable quarterbacks with way better rosters, beat them. They went through the gauntlet of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson 2 years running. What is it going to take to beat these guys? And if they do it again and just keep gaining confidence, like, where's the hope? If the Eagles win, that gives the 49ers, that gives the whole league hope, for one. But it gives the 49ers, I think, extra hope in the way that they're building their roster or have preferred to build their roster up to this point, which is have an uber talented roster surrounding their quarterback. And you may not have the elite quarterback, but as long as you have a good one and you can surround them with elite talent, you can win a Super Bowl. So far, that has proven to not win you a Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
But the Eagles doing it, that is exactly what they're doing. A good quarterback who's capable, not my cup of tea, but he is good and he is capable with an elite roster surrounding him. If they can win this game, that would be huge for the 49ers in particular and the rest of the league. So that's why I'm going to prefer that the Eagles win.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to prefer the Eagles win because I'm never cheering for the Chiefs to win. So by default, it's going to be Eagles. And also, my best friend's a hardcore Eagles fan. He flew out from California to the NFC Championship game. He's going to the Super Bowl. So, so I want to see him happy. So yeah, I'm going Eagles, but really, I'm watching the Super Bowl for the Kendrick Lamar halftime show. That's pretty much
it. This is the worst case scenario for non-Chiefs and Eagles fans. The worst. I mean, any other combo would have been fine. If the Bills had won or the Commanders, I don't care who they would have faced. At least it would have been something different. This is worst case scenario for 49er fans, especially because these are two teams we cannot stand.
It could have been worse, right? The Cowboys could be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, okay, all right. Yes, there could have been worse, but based off of teams that actually had a chance to go to the Super Bowl, this is the worst case scenario. Ugh. Anyways, Sunil, thank you so much for giving me a little over an hour of your time. Great to do a show with you. Hopefully, you're not traveling too much. At least we can get together maybe once a month, it sounds like, because you have one off week of not traveling.
Sure.
But I do love these shows with you. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much. I'll be back tomorrow night on Bleacher Report. And I don't know that I don't have another show scheduled for the rest of the week. Doesn't mean I won't do one, but as of now, other than my Bleacher Report shows on Thursday and Friday, I'll probably end up laying low, but we will see. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much love. Oh, actually, hold on. Dave Barclay says Captain Crunch and Cocoa Pebbles at night when I smoke. So he still is clearly a cereal eater. And then Dazza says, would you rather Jim Harbaugh or Kyle?
Yeah, I think I can answer this for both of you. Jim is going to be Jesse's pick. Kyle's going to be my pick.
Correct. Yes. You're very good at this. Look at you, man. That's awesome. Yes, that is, you know me too well. You know me too well. All right, y'all. Have a good night. Peace.